Anyway, thanks for joining us. We usually have several of our coaches on this call too, but they're all en route to a meeting here at the district office this afternoon. So that's likely why most of them are not on with us. But we want to switch our attention for the next few minutes to hear from Ron Jackson and Clay Ellum. We've reserved this time to just kind of hear from him. So he and I are going to chat for a bit as you listen in, and then we'll conclude with a question and answer time. So if there's some things Ron talks about in this few moments together, feel free to jot those down, and we'll give you a chance to ask those after just a bit. But Ron, you mentioned you were in Clay Ellum. Go back for us and just tell us a little bit about the community of Clay Ellum, so we have kind of in mind the context in which you serve.
Okay, first of all, I want to say what's up, Peter. Good to see you. Long time. Pete, we go way back to when I think we were probably both starting out in our ministry together. So it's fascinating because I was able to share some of this stuff with you and Grant, and you guys were inspirational to me during this process. So Clay Ellum, I don't know how many of you know about Clay Ellum. If you know where Ellensburg is, Clay Ellum is about 20, well, it's technically it's about 30 minutes, but I get there in about 24 minutes in terms of driving. It is a small community, predominantly, I don't know, it's growing because a lot of folks are moving in from the west side. But when I got there, there were about 500 in South Clay Ellum and about 1,800 people in Clay Ellum proper. It's probably a little bit more than that now because the area is starting to just take off with tremendous growth. And so I got a call from district saying that Clay Ellum Alliance was looking for a church. And I think Dennis Pust was a part of this along with Matt at the time. And my first reaction was absolutely not, because Clay Ellum, okay, can I just be real with you? Clay Ellum does not have a lot of Black folk there. Okay, and so here I am going to Clay Ellum, and I didn't know if that was going to be a right fit for me. Nonetheless, with the encouragement of my wife and a little prompting from the Lord, we took on the call to go to Clay Ellum. And it's definitely a call. My natural instincts would have not taken me to Clay Ellum. I would have gone to a different place, but nonetheless, God called me there, and they voted me in, and and so that's how I ended up at Clay Ellum.
Yeah, and you've been there how long, Ron?
11 years.
11 years. Yeah, wow, what a journey. Hey, describe to us just kind of briefly what were your impressions? What was the church like when you first got there? Describe the church a little bit to us. What did you see? What did you hear? What was there? Yeah,
so the church itself was predominantly an older church. There were about 35 folks there, 35 people when we got there, and it didn't have a really good reputation. This church, from what we heard, had gone through 5 pastors in less than 10 years. And so we know that there were a lot of leadership issues and a lot of folks who seemed like they were in charge of the church. And so when we got there, we did a little research, some assessment, folks in the community. We wanted to know what the community was like and what the church was like. And the reputation that church had was number one, it couldn't keep pastors. Number two, it was known for wife shopping. There was a lot of inappropriate relationships happening with individuals in the church, but also even with some of those in leadership in the church that were pastors. And so it was a very unhealthy, unstable, but yet there was a core group of people who were managing and who were leading the church during this time. And so that's what the church was like when we got there.
What were some of the positive things at that point that you think might have been there?
There was a core group of people who they were concerned with the needs of the people there. It felt like one big family group. I mean, if someone had a problem, they would attend to the need of the family in the church. So it just felt like a real family, oriented, look out for your brother type church, and meet the need of the church. I mean, a lot of potlucks. We changed that word, by the way, but a lot of potlucks, in the church, of people just coming together just to be together because they love being together.
Yeah. So as you got started then in that ministry of redeveloping that church, what were some of the obstacles that you ran into as you tried to move that forward?
The country club feel, they were centric in terms of their lifestyle and ministry, but the church did not become rated. And what I mean is they were more focused on what was happening inside the church. There was no real sense of reaching out into the community. They were loving each other, but they weren't loving their neighbor. There was no sense or urgency of fulfilling the Great Commission. And so that was a major obstacle that we ran into. But also there was a real sense of a lack of spirituality in the church. The leaders in that church, they were more social. They were more, internal. But in terms of having a real sense of spirituality, of what God would, have us to do, in terms of, preaching the Word of God, teaching people how to grow deeper in their relationship with Christ, helping people understand that the church is to be out into the world. There was no sense of urgency or spirituality as it relates to those things.
Do you recall how you had to go about creating an environment to create the shift that needed to happen? What were some of the things that had to happen in order for that to change?
Yeah, there had to be a change in the leadership. The leadership was really unhealthy. Those who were leading the church, and we were in an unaccredited status at this time, and so those who were leaders were considered to be the advisors. But those who were giving advice were their background. Some were coming from a Catholic background, and so some of those thought we needed to bring, the catechisms back into the church. Others were Lutheran, and they believed in more social programs, and others were just carnal in terms of their understanding of Scripture and understanding, of the church. And so one of the things that I assessed right away was if this church was going to be healthy, there has to be a sense or a change in leadership. And so that's one of the things that I started to address. The thing is I realized that it was important for me to stay in close contact with district, and in terms of some of the changes that I was making, because I wanted to make sure that, and I was expecting when this thing, it's not if, but when this thing finally erupts, I wanted district to be a part of it. And so one of the things I did is I stayed in touch with Dennis on a lot of these issues.
So what are some things you've learned in the process, Ron, about yourself, your leadership?
Well, gosh, I mean, one of the things that I learned during this time, because during this time of eruptions, shall I say, that these guys didn't play fair. They played very dirty. And what I mean by that is they actually started a coup. They started can I use the word insurrection, I guess? I mean, that's what they started, right in the church. And they started going around getting petitions from people trying to vote me out of of our ministry. They were writing nasty notes to me. They would, phone calls on a daily basis. At least it seemed like it. They were, my wife at times would be upstairs crying, saying, "This is not worth it. We just need to leave. I mean, if this is what serving Christ is, then, as a pastor and a pastor's wife, I don't want it." She, matter of fact, said, "This is the dark side of ministry that no one really sees." And so the emotional stuff that we had to grapple with was a challenge. Signing the petitions, going around trying to get people to get us out. And we had an experienced guy who's still on our board today. And these words have stuck with me to today. He said, "Stay the course." And he is he used to work in the Intel, department with like Benjamin Netanyahu, and he understands military terms, and he realized we were in a fight, and he said, "Ron, just stay the course." He said, let all the stuff come your way, but for you stay the course. You keep preaching the gospel. You keep, telling people about Jesus. You keep on trying to make disciples. He says, whatever you do, you stay the course. And so for the 5 years of battle, because it took 5 years before eventually some of these folks started to leave, the 5 years of battle, all we did was we stayed the course. There were times when I would get up and preach, and you can just see the snares on their face, and just they're taking notes, hoping that I'm saying something wrong, but yet you got to stand up and preach against these people. And I could remember the words, "Just stay the course." Even when you're up on the pulpit and people don't like you, you stay the course. You just stay obedient to God, and that's what we did. And long story short is the toilet did flush. I mean, people did start to leave, and I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, Dennis, but things did turn around. They did turn around, and so there's hope. But in the midst of the struggle and the hardship, you can't see the hope. All you can see is the battle. But for us, it was just staying the course, and God turned it around. And I take no credit for this, but this is all a God thing. Because in my natural self, I would have left. It would have been easy to go back and serve God on the mission field than to serve those people there. But we stayed the course, and God brought us through.
Yeah. So describe the difference today in the church from what it was back prior to the battle and through the battle. What's it like today?
So, well, I can tell you, standing on the pulpit and seeing folks just stare at you like you're an idiot. There's a whole new crowd in there. We got folks in there that it's a white church, but yet it feels like a black church, if I can say that, because these guys they're preaching back to me. They're like, "Amen, brother, preach it. That's right. Hallelujah,
Amen, brother. Yeah.
Let's go." I mean, they're standing up, raising their hands, and I got to tell them this. Wait, I'm not done yet with my point. So there's life, and there's energy, and there's a sense of excitement. The word is being exegeted in its context. It's being preached, and people are hungry. They're hungry to come to church. I mean, we're doing 2 services now. It's not 35, but we're doing 2, and it's growing. And people are not only in numbers, but we've been able to put some systems in place where people can come and grow, and they can see and experience, and then they can go and tell what God is doing. And so it's a brand new church. And I would have never thought this when we were going through it, but it's a brand new church. And it's just staying the course.
So I hear you saying, it was a 5-6 year, maybe a 7-year uphill climb while you just stay the course. And now there's a new day that breaks through, and there's real joy and excitement and peace, and just a great spirit there in the church. What does it take to, besides staying the course, how would you describe for us who are maybe in the midst of that, what does it take to get to that level of change as you lead as a pastor? What does it take to get there?
I would say number one for me is I had to keep going back to knowing that I'm called, that God has called me to this, and regardless of what comes my way, it's the call that matters.
Mm.
And then two, just prayer, spending time in prayer with God, and praying that God brings the right people in who can come alongside and be a part of what He's doing, and and just supporting. And then two, just watching God as you stay faithful to the word of God. No gimmicks and feel good stuff, but it's really just having integrity to just share His word for what it is. And as He does that, just have some systems in place where you can work with your leaders, and where you can train and see disciples made, and that you can encourage them to go out into the world and make disciples.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I mean, that's what's been working for us, at least.
Mhm. Ron, when you came into this, did you have any background in leading turnaround?
No, absolutely no. You know what? I mean, I wish they would teach this in school, but then again, I mean, the best school is to actually kind of just go through it and just trust God.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
no, there was no experience. I mean, we served 12 years on the mission field. And the thing is, we had lots of theory as it relates to working with pastors and leaders,
Mm-hmm.
but the practical experience of going through this and watching God do it, it only comes from Him. It really does. It's His story. It's not ours. It's God's work. It's His ministry. And all He asks us to do is just stay faithful in it.
Yep. So as we wrap up this interview with you, what 3 or 4 things might you add to what, or just reiterate what some things you've already said? The 3 or 4 things you'd really like to pass on to this kind of group where we're kind of in a similar journey, and then we'll open it up for some questions and answers.
Yeah, I would just reiterate. Don't question your call, because in the midst of the battle, you will. You may have doubts, but I would just say, if God's called, He will provide.
Mm-hmm.
It may take 3, 4, 5, 6 years, but just know without a shadow of a doubt that you're called. Prayer and in constant relationship with Him is important. I would say find someone, like for me, it was a Dennis Pust, who you can just bounce things off to make sure that you're not losing your mind, or just, for some other insight. And then I would just say, too, just make sure that you just, I mean, for me, it's just, you stay the course, just don't quit, but just stay faithful to what God's called you to do.
Good word, Ron. Good word. It's always a God story. We say that quite often, and you're living proof that is true. You've told me numerous times, Dennis, I don't know what I'm doing,
I have no clue.
but I'm just trying to follow and be obedient to what God's called me to, and stay close to Him and withstand the battle with His strength. And as you've done that, there are these moments where you sort of come through the wall, and all of a sudden there's light and there's life and there's hope and there's a future. So, yeah.
I didn't, during the time, Dennis, I didn't think ministry could be as exciting and as fun as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it is. There's a joy. I mean, even during the time, if I don't know how much time I have, but even during COVID, when COVID broke out, it's like going through what we went through. It wasn't that big of a deal for us, because, and I don't say that to be arrogant, please, hear what I'm saying. We didn't know what we were going to do during COVID, but God did.
Mm-hmm.
And He said, go to the parking lot. We said, so we started doing church in our parking lot. And every Sunday it was just jam packed. We turned things on the radio. We had people who had never come to church out on their porches, just dancing and waiting for us, as we did church in the parking lot. And it's just because we stayed the course. We believed God, we trusted him, and he just made a way for us.
Yeah. Beautiful story. Well, we praise God for what has happened in Clay Ellum and you're under your watch, and I love the humility and grace to recognize that this is not something we can do. It is a part we play with God in the process, but it's a God story. So I'm struck by the commonality we have in the journey of, and therefore the battle that we're up against, on many fronts, the necessity of coming back to our calling in the midst of that. I recall as well when I was 21 years in a pastorate that was from redevelopment to a new church, and boy, the many times I had to go back and just realize this is a God story. It's not up to me. And the battles that come and go, wow, there's just the need to stay with this thing for the long haul, and it becomes a God story. So, and then that interpersonal struggle I shared with my group, because we all kind of were experiencing or have experienced coming to the end of ourselves or wrestling with our internal insecurities. And there was a time I remember about 7-8 years into it where I was in a fetal position in the back of my van, totally lost. And the whole issue was my own internal insecurities and wrestling through that, thinking I had to perform, I had to do this. This was up to me. And I knew that that wasn't, but yet I was functioning that way with that kind of energy. And boy, what Ron has said has really helped me just, again, rehearse. Yeah, boy, that need to release those insecurities and let God do the battle and stay with it and the deep calling that he's called me here. So
just to piggyback on that, there is this prayer that we were exposed to in Soul Formation Academy that says, trust the slow work of God. Because our tendency is to want to be today what we can only become by the work of the Spirit tomorrow. And I have to remind myself, God is at work here, even though I don't see it and I don't feel it. But by faith, I believe that he is going to continue the good work that he began.
Yeah, trust the slow work of God. That's redevelopment. That's revitalization work for sure. Let me pray for us. Father, we give you thanks for one another. Thank you for the common journey that we have together in you. Thank you for this opportunity in this forum to encourage each other today in our own isolated places, yet being able to connect this way. And I pray that for every person that has been on this call today, that they'll go away encouraged in some level, that you indeed are at work, and we'll have a greater trust of your slow work of transformation, both in our own lives as well as in the lives of those that we serve and lead. So we thank you for each church, each place. Thank you for your deep calling in our life to call us to such a place for such a time as this. May you find our hearts faithful to that calling and our hands open to receive from you all that you want to pour into us as you write your story. Thank you for using each of these men and their wives, their families, and leaders around them that are close to them to carry on this work that you long to accomplish. So help us to stick with you, stay with it in the long haul, but stay out of the way at the same time as we let you do your work. Bless each of these men with that sense of calling today and renewed energy and strength that comes from you to encourage our hearts for the tasks that are before us. May the preaching of your word, may the words, decisions that they make in board meetings and leadership meetings and gatherings be pleasing to you, and may you be evident in every situation and conversation, I pray. In the strong name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you all for joining us today. So pass the word around to others that might gain from our time together. All right. Every Thursday, every third Thursday, 10 o'clock. See you then.